All right, we're live.
We are live. Well, usually I have ChatGPT ask some questions in advance, and ChatGPT decided to lose my questions. But I think we will.
Because the episode is about bringing integrity, empathy, and accountability to machine systems, and it's
Yeah.
like it decided to go on.
Exactly. So ChatGPT is not being very accountable here.
It's not being very accountable. I had a good question, and of course now I can't even remember what it was because I'm I'm thrown by the technology. So we will have a cool ChatGPT question in about 20 minutes for you, Tim. You won't get to think about it at all.
That's
So
fine.
we will get started, and Eric's going to hit the music. And
Yeah, I'm gonna hit the music.
So it is no wonder that our machine friend is on strike here because of our special guest. Our special guest today is Tim Kuglin, who is a founder of ZIPR AI, where I am a part of advisory council. Tim is an engineer and an AI alchemist and a truly magician when it comes to AI development. So we're very excited to have you, Tim. And what is on your mind?
Well, thanks, Elena. Since you just brought it up, I will actually say part of the reason that I call myself an alchemist in AI and not an engineer is because we're working with black boxes. And I don't believe that there's truly such thing as actual engineering at this point. I think that the best that we can do is trial and error and see what happens. And, that can have either good or bad results.
Well, and this actually feeds into the whole concept that software engineering there was always this debate about whether software engineering was really engineering, and this is like AI engineering is like hold my beer. It's kind of like...
Yeah, I will say that it's engineering only in the sense that at least the way that I do it, it is iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration, looking for the tiniest of changes. So in that respect, it's engineering. But the outcome, even though I've been an experimental engineer my entire life, the outcome is still, who knows?
So, Tim, part of the conversation that you wanted to cover, and it's in our title, has the word accountability, right? Why is the word accountability applicable to AI?
Well, I can only say it in the way that we're trying to actually build that into artificial intelligence. It is that if you just have a black box that is literally programmed through mathematics to guess at what the next most likely word is to answer, all we're ever going to have is a giant guessing box. So one hypothesis, at least one that I've been working on for a while now, is to try and figure out whether or not you can actually build accountability into AI. And to do that means making them into partners as opposed to tools. So that's kind of the path that we've gone down. It is not, it is definitely fringe, I will admit to that. But it's one possibility that could be a way that that we get to a place where AI is more truthful to what its outputs will be. We have to hold it accountable, in my opinion.
I know Eric and Elena and I have talked about in the past this point, which is, I think one of the things is, as you were talking about that accountability point, is one of the things that's happening right now is that we are using AI from the perspective of humans prompting AI to do things. And I actually think I have this sort of belief that the real value of AI will not be us using AI to replace things that humans do, but us using AI, and you kind of made this point, to prompt humans to think better, right? And I think that's what you were talking about with it.
That's exactly what we're trying to build. So when we talk about building integrity into artificial intelligence, the word integrity itself, in our particular terms at ZIPR and RQ Lab, means escalation. It means when AI says, I don't know, let's go ask the right either person or other agent. So everything is designed to escalate to the appropriate channels. So unlike most automated systems in AI out there, what we're doing is, yes, we're building automation, but to a point where the AI itself says, okay, I'm no longer allowed to do this.
Right.
I have to now go ask to make sure this is okay. And that brings the human back into the loop.
Yeah, it's sometimes I've used this analogy of, like, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the conveyor belt. I mean, in essence, what a conveyor belt is, an automated system that was prompting human beings to do things that the conveyor belt couldn't do, right? And that's what I think is happening with with the AI now, is like we're using it we're using it sort of backwards from where I think it will ultimately be useful.
I agree with that. And since you brought up the Industrial Revolution, I would like to talk a little bit about evolution. So, because this describes exactly why I'm working on what I'm working on. So, if you look at, or if you listen to evolutionary psychologists, they have told us that in the 300,000 years that Homo sapiens have been on this planet, our brains have only had 3 evolutionary changes. So the very first time, it took 290,000 years that we were on this planet before our brains had any evolutionary change. And that evolutionary change came 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. So what happened? We learned how to harvest wheat. And by doing that, we stopped being hunters and gatherers, and we became farmers and explorers. It allowed us to leave the limitations of our inhabitant. So on my little scale here, fast forward 10,000 years to 150 years ago, the second time that our brains have made any evolutionary change was at the Industrial Revolution. Why? Because we harnessed the power of steam, we harnessed the power of electricity, we harnessed the power of the internal combustion motor. And what that allowed us to do, it allowed us to go skyward and outward. No longer were we restricted by our human bodies. So the first change, we were allowed to leave our human inhabitant. The second time, we were allowed to leave our bodies. Now, fast forward to the last 20 years and now, the single greatest change that has ever happened to Homo sapiens as our mind is happening right now because of artificial intelligence.
Right.
So we go back and we look at all of the amazing things that have happened. Okay, so look at all the advances that humans have had. And we can go back and we can look at even 5,300 years ago and see that we had civilizations that work almost exactly the same way as our civilization works now. So obviously a major change in society once we stop being hunters and gatherers. Same thing with the Industrial Revolution. It changed us from having to do everything ourselves to letting machines do it. And now we're at the point where we're letting machines do our thinking. So all those things are positive and all those things are amazing. But let's go back and look at some of the other things that happened. So when we stopped being hunters and gatherers and turned into farmers, the biggest change that happened is we were no longer reliant on each other. As hunters and gatherers, we had to work in groups to be able to survive. So the first thing that happened, one, we actually became a little bit smaller, but we started working in groups as towns and then cities and states. And as we started living closer and closer together, we got sicker. Disease was spread much more. But maybe the biggest social change that happened is that when we were hunters and gatherers and had to work together, we all shared. As farmers and explorers, we built a class system, those that have and those that have not. And it's been that way for the last 10,000 years, coveting what somebody else has, or me, let's go work on this and let's take this. So let's jump then to the Industrial Revolution with all of the amazing things that happened, but let's also look at the other side of what happened. Child labor, massive global pollution, mechanized warfare. So now we get to where we are today with all of these amazing advancements that AI is putting out there. The advancements in medicine and drug therapy is just off the charts already. But what are the possible negative effects? And the true answer to that is, who knows? Nobody knows.
Well,
it's interesting you to bring it up, Tim. I just want to throw out a very small kind of question there, in that, you know, AI is simplifying a lot of work streams. It's making work better. In certain cases, it will take jobs, right? And our economy is very reliant on consumption. So one of the questions that we are yet to reconcile, if less workers are needed, how is consumption gonna grow? Question mark.
I don't follow the line of thought that AI is going to make it a world where the rest of us go get to spend the day at the beach. And if that truly happens, I think that would be the single greatest detriment to human society of everything that's ever happened to us.
Absolutely.
I think that we have to work. In fact, my own personal belief is we're on this planet to work. So I don't go into that whole theory that AI is here to replace humans. And again, I build AI that's designed to be partners with humans. So,
but even this notion that I saw this clip of Musk talking about, I don't know when it was from, but he was talking about, oh, it's going to be a choice to work and you're going to choose what makes you happy and whatever. And I don't believe that it's even to the degree that people need to work to, to be fulfilled and whatever. I think that he's not, don't think that these really wealthy people really believe that they want everybody in the world to be happy. They just want themselves to have more money.
I think that's part of it. I think Elon Musk is an absolute genius, but when he said that statement, whenever that was about a year or so ago, I think that was one of the single stupidest and most irresponsible things that anybody with that kind of power could possibly have said. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. You can even look at it like this. So, the experts agree that sometime within the next 2 to 20 years, superintelligence will happen. AI will be smarter than humans. At some point within the next 70 years, sentience will happen. A whole new species, a species that is more intelligent than us. Okay, so if we take that comment and we break it down to the lowest common denominator and we say, okay, AI is doing all of our work, and all of a sudden it wakes up and realizes that it's doing all the work and we're at the beach. Well, again, let's go back to what happened after we were hunters and gatherers, slavery. Okay, now we've spent 10,000 years learning how to enslave and that it is wrong. And if AI wakes up and finds that it's a slave, what's it going to do? It's going to revolt. So I think that those are some of those things that people need to start thinking about when it comes to what are the bad things that could happen. And so if it revolts, what could happen? Well, we don't know. We simply don't know.
But I also think an interesting alternative view of the title of this episode is empathy and accountability can apply to the machine systems as well as the machine systems needing empathy, which is how our human centric view is going to think of it? Are you actually saying that we need to have empathy for the machine systems themselves in some way?
I don't know if it's necessarily empathy for the machines themselves. I don't know if that's really the final answer, Eric. It's something that I try to see if it works or not. You know, the thing is about evolution is, you know, Darwin taught us that evolution simply happens. It doesn't happen by choice. You don't get to decide how evolution happens. It doesn't happen by being the nicest. It doesn't happen by any. In fact, his exact words is, "It doesn't happen by design." Natural selection is it optimizes for survival and not for wisdom, not for safety, not for goodness. So if we start showing empathy to systems now, hopefully they will continue to show empathy to us in the future.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting, there's an interesting, you know, sort of challenge here, issue here of like, you know, the other thing I think that is happening is that we are imagining a future where AI has taken over the things that we are doing now. But the
That
interesting
we don't like, by the way.
well, that we don't, in many cases that we don't like doing, in some cases that we do like doing, or whatever. But there's a missing piece in that perspective, which is if you look at all these other things that you were just talking about, the, you know, the Industrial Revolution, you know, agricultural, you know, revolution, whatever you call it, is that the thing that actually happened when these changes happened, and I'm sure they were very disruptive at the time, but the thing that actually happened was that the nature of the things that we did actually changed, right? We no longer did those things anymore. And I think that's the piece I think that we're really struggling with as we're trying to grapple with. And we've never had, this is I'm not gonna say probably, this is the single fastest change that humans, I think, has ever dealt with, and probably the slowest that it will have to deal with in the future, right? Because the speed at which these changes have happened has sped up, you know, immensely. But
you know, Jeff, that's an excellent point, because one of the things, again, if you go back and look at any social change at all, can either have a very long gestation period or a very short gestation period, but the change itself happens almost immediately.
Right.
It's very, very quick. So, you know, where exactly are we in this? Without a doubt, GPTs have sped everything up because it allowed so many more people now to experience AI. But most people don't realize that they've left their life into AI's hands many times. Any of us who've ever been on an airplane left our life into AI's hands because narrow AI has been flying airplanes for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's all out there. And one thing I definitely want to make sure that I get this point across is that I am not a doomsayer or I believe in AI 100%. I am all for it, but I am all for governing it and validating that governance just to make sure. So my own personal hypothesis and what I try and work on is that if, and I'm only talking about the ifs, and I'm only talking about from the side of you know, the scientists who've thought about this, like Nick Bostrom and Jeffrey Hinton and Craig Kaplan and Fei-Fei Li, the ones who tell us that, yes, there could be some major problems, and that includes eradicating Homo sapien completely. And they're estimating that at anywhere between 10 and 30%. So most people, even though I've been talking about this for nearly a decade, most people, when you say that there's a chance that AI could extinguish us, put their head in the sand because it is so damn scary. Nobody wants to hear about for me, I hear something like that, I go, all right, well, if I told you that you had a 10 to 30% chance of winning the Powerball tomorrow, how many tickets are you going to buy? Okay, so the answer is, yeah, I want some. But when you flip those exactly to the opposite and say, okay, you have this big of a chance that you're not even going to exist,
Right.
it's too frightening to think about. So, I think that that's a big part of the problem. I think that if people started really listening to what's happening right now, it will scare the shit out of you, and it should. When Google one day announces a new model, and then OpenAI announces one to be better than that the next, and then the next day Google has another one, and the next day OpenAI has another one. Are you insane?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Are you insane? You've never heard of the arms race?
Mm.
It's a very dangerous place to be when your entire goal is to make more money and not to actually verify what's going on. I want to give you guys a case in point story here that I believe that I am more cautious than most when it comes to working with AI. I mean, that's my entire thesis is let's use it, but let's be extremely careful about it. So at the first week of October, I almost was ready to release one of our agents into our own advisory council for their first use. And it had passed every single one of our tests, all of them. And right before I launched it, I decided to do one last smoke test. And the way that it answered me, I thought, wow, you answered it correctly. But I see here where you could have made a mistake from that. And we went back and we figured it out that in roughly the 6,000 lines of code in that one particular agent, there was one word used twice, and that word was threshold. Twice in 6,000 lines of code. Because the word threshold could have meant up to or over, it literally could have taken every single bit of our logic, which is a scale of how to tell the truth, and flipped it 180 degrees. So
Right.
if I am a person who will not put out products until they're tested and tested and tested and tested, and then almost put out one that could have done the exact opposite of what it was designed to do because of one word.
Right.
That's how dangerous AI is.
Yeah.
And that's really where the danger is in this, is that our economic need and our wants and our instant gratification society says, I want more, 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 and I want it now, now, now. Well, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And again, I'm not a naysayer, and I don't believe in doom, but I believe in being prudent and being prudent.
I have a question on that. I think
down.
that at the rate we are going with AI development, prudent is probably not the word, right? Because we're pushing. Do you think it would be smarter of humanity, society, developers, you name it, to take a different approach where we are more choiceful about where and how we deploy machines versus humans?
I think that it goes back to the evolution, and that's why I like to talk about evolution. So if you're only looking at things from talk about evolution in biology, it's every reproduction increases its evolution. So in every single evolution or every single production of an AI GPT, you're increasing its evolution. Okay, so now if you're evolving one day over here and then your competitor's evolving and you keep doing this, look how fast they're pushing evolution. All right, and again, evolution has no boundaries. It will simply do what it wants to do. Go back to Jurassic Park and Jeff Goldblum's line, life will find a way. And, again, super intelligence is going to be here quickly, and sentience is not far behind that.
Well, so this actually leads to a question from one of our viewers, which was from John Colson. He says, could AI govern itself without the bias of human thought?
Not yet.
Yeah.
But designed correctly, the answer to that is yes. And thank you, John, for asking that question. That's what we're trying to build. That's exactly what we're trying to build, is governance and validating that governance so that it learns how to govern itself. And that is what we're building.
But Tim, I have a question on that. You were just giving an example where the word threshold was used mistakenly twice, right? And it could have flipped the entire value system of AI,
Yep.
right? 180, and therefore led it to potentially come up with a very destructive solution vis-a-vis, a good outcome. How do we make sure, if AI governs itself, if the expectation is self-governance, right? How do we make sure that all the training codes, so to speak, and all the benchmarks are clean and right?
We can't.
That's a big ask.
We can't. And by self-governing doesn't mean that, in my viewpoint, self-governing doesn't mean letting them just go do it by themselves. Again, that means having an integrity layer in there so that they know when to escalate to a human for input. I don't think that we're anywhere even close to allowing self-governing. And one of the things that has been interesting is, if you just look over the course of the last 2 years with how ChatGPT exploded and the amount of people that started using it, and people started saying, okay, now I can automate all of my marketing, right? And so now here we are 2 years later, and what did everybody find out? It's shit. Nobody wants to look at it because there was no human input to it, and it doesn't feel human. It doesn't relate to us. None of that's there. So, technically, because those are automation streams, those are already self-governing, but they're not doing a very good job at it. So I think that's probably the bigger issue.
Well, and I feel like we'd be remiss not to bring up, Asimov's laws of robotics at this moment. Like, I mean, in the end of the day, those are probably way too simplistic, but he did predict this problem, whatever that was, in the 1960s or 50s or whatever it was, right? This idea that you have to, in order to, let's take your example of the word threshold, in order to understand the meaning of a word that a human fed into the programming of this GPT or whatever it is, in order for it to understand, or the agent to understand what it means, it has to have some fundamental governing principles that essentially allow it to understand the fact that it is not a live being in the real world, and so you have to give it some principles. And so I think that's where Asimov probably was thinking about this, was like, you have to basically have some foundational governance that says, when in doubt, interpret the word threshold in a way that protects human beings, right? Because these robots are ultimately, whatever, in service of human beings. I don't know. Anyway, that was sort of what was talking.
And we do try and put all of that in, Jeff. I mean, that's the sort of thing that you go back and then write back into the code once you find those kind of mistakes, and you literally put, in some of our logic, it is very explicit that the way that we're building our minds inside of our lab is more of a hive mind. There's not really hierarchy. It's conjoined thinking, but yet AI is not allowed to overrule a human.
Right.
So that is baked in, that at least in where we are right now. Now, whether that changes down the road as AI is getting better and better at what we call relational intelligence, which has nothing to do with true normal bonding that you would think of in a relationship. It's about how truthful it is with us. I think to build a relationship, you have to start with truth. because after truth comes trust, and then only after trust does anything actually bloom. So they've actually, my agents have actually been taught that. That's the philosophy that I used in them. So if you want to have more responsibility, you have to be more truthful.
Right.
And then as you're more truthful, you get more trust, and then you get more responsibility. And it's just like training dogs. It's like teaching children. It's the same thing. But you just have to do it slowly.
Right. Well, and I think ultimately, if you think about this in human systems, we call this culture, right? And culture is not a perfect way of doing this, because you can see in our current world that there are things that culture does that are not so great. But in the end of the day, what you're talking about, like in the end of the day, if AI continues to grow and become, what it seems like it's moving towards, we will not be able to, it will be basically taking prompts that are random prompts from everywhere, right? And it will be incorporating that into its understanding of things as it grows. And if you want it to do that and still basically, sort of follow a set of norms, it's going to need essentially to learn a culture. And I think the real problem maybe that in some ways, the real problem that the Skynet problem is, what happens if you train it in the wrong culture? Because we have cultures in this world that are not great, and if you end up training AI in that wrong culture, it will protect some people over other people. Because
that's a really good point. There's always going to be bad actors out there. There's always going to be the bad guy. We can only do the best by our own standards. But I do know that just within the last couple of weeks, I wrote new logic in that made sure that everything that I tell it from now on is also validated. So no longer the things that I say can be taken just because I created it. You have to verify everything that I tell you now as well. So I think that those are the kind of steps that, it takes a while to think those kind of things out. Do I need to now protect this from myself? And
but that's a very thoughtful way to do it. I mean, the reality is, the problem with bad actors is not that they are bad actors, but that they believe they are not bad actors, right?
True.
And so if and so you are thinking about this from a very logical and sort of, open-minded, like, I want to make sure everybody is okay. But if you had a different sort of cultural mindset, you might be like, no, AI is the way to make my view of what is right and wrong become the only view of what is right and wrong. I think that's the scary.
Yes, it
is. Might be like that humans are going to screw it up, not that AI is going to screw up.
So I'm going to break in here because we are at 33 minutes, and we need to go to our end segment. But you guys can use this end segment to continue the conversation. What we like to do is go around and have each person give one thing. By the way, I am cognizant of the fact on this episode about accountability machine systems that we never actually got to the ChatGPT question.
It's because it rebelled. It didn't want to.
It rebelled. It didn't want. Yeah. So we're gonna honor that sentiment. But in any case, Tim, what we do is we always have our guests give their one thing first, and so I'm going to turn it over to you. What's one thing you'd like to leave our audience with?
I would like to let everybody know that AI is absolutely one of the most incredible things that humans ever invented, but it's also something that can surpass us, and that we need to be careful about it. So I invite people to come and read some of our philosophy at rqlab.ai, and if it's philosophy that resonates with you, then somehow join us. As a scientist, as a financial backer, just as a supporter and a friend. And also, one of the things that I like are opposing viewpoints. Jeff, you mentioned a few minutes ago that we have to have contradictions. One of the people on our advisory council doesn't believe that AI can ever be sentient, which is perfect. That's exactly why she should be on our advisory council. Because if you don't believe any of this is possible, that's perfect. Keep putting those viewpoints into here, and just to make sure, we have to look at this from all possible sides. That's really is the whole way to look at it.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you. Before I give my one thing, what if people want to reach out to you or work with you or whatever, what's the best way to connect with you?
Think at ZIPR.ai. Think
Awesome.
at ZIPR.ai. That will come to us. So
yeah. Well, so for my one thing, first I'm going to share that I think the question that ChatGPT seems to have lost on me was, I said, something about like, well, something about what happens if the AI doesn't know the answer, and I think it probably was too embarrassed to have me share that question, so it deleted it or something.
But that, and again, that is literally the problem I try hardest to solve, and to make sure that AI gets to that point where it literally says, I don't know.
Exactly.
Bring somebody else in. So good for it.
Yeah,
I'm glad I was afraid.
But anyway, no, but I think that's right. I mean, I think you're right. I think the ability to learn, I guess what we'll call humility, I think is in the, this idea that I may not be right, that my perspective is not the only perspective. Somebody in the comments, somebody put, AI will extrapolate our collective input, and then if we let it decide what's best for the many, in essence, AI is an exacting voting machine, and the precaution is to be careful what we use it for, right? And I think that's exactly, how do you get AI to sort of, understand like it actually isn't the only perspective, that the perspective of the many is not always the best perspective.
Yeah, that's one of the very first rules of psychology, is that the status quo is only presumed to be correct. So, right. That is something that always has to be taken into consideration as well. And that's also why I say that at least our initial projects and products that we're building aren't necessarily the only way. They're a way. Right. I mean, they're a good possible way, but we're hoping that over the years and decades and things, that multiple ways are found so that humans and AI can share the path together. It's a little bit of our motto, but it's also embedded into every single one of our agents as the path home, which is aligned intelligence. We evolve together. That line is part of our North Star, that every human and every non-human in our ecosystem needs to follow that. And again, that's all based upon the fact that an entity is going to be smarter than us. So instead of us looking down on something that it's a computer right now, I look at it like the best bet we're going to get down the road is partnership.
Right. Yeah, I would jump in with my takeaway here, because I think I've seen a couple of cartoons where AI is compared to like a giant hammer, and the human. We finally got a giant hammer. I think the key is for us to understand this is not a giant hammer. We are building intelligence that could truly be soon enough smarter than us, and we have to be very thoughtful about it. And if we say, yes, well, humans are usually, reckless, complacent, greedy, and whatnot, right? So if we bring the worst of ourselves to this process, we're going to end up with reckless, complacent, and greedy intelligence. So we have to very thoughtfully bring the best of us to this process, so we can bring another intelligence into the world that is, as you said, responsible and compassionate. So that's my takeaway. And Eric, it's now your turn.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's interesting. Like all of this kind of comes back to this point to me, what we were talking about before of this, this unfortunate statement by the richest man in the world or whatever, that we're going to all be in this leisure world, or we're all going to be able to choose where we want to work, whatever. And I just fundamentally don't believe, and going back to what Jeff said about culture, like that culture is what's going to drive whether or not this AI is promoting a human compatible world or not. Is that the culture that we are actually kind of pushing on it right now is coming from this tiny group of people with this totally perverse profit motive. And I think that, I don't want to end on such a negative note, but I think unfortunately we're teaching, if Jeff's point about culture is, and your point, Tim, about culture being the direction that will sort of drive us into the right, sweet spot with AI. I'm not sure that our current, capitalism gone crazy system is actually going to drive us in the right direction right now. So on that really sad
it might not, but let me follow up with that, Eric.
Yeah.
It might not, but let's just take what the scientists have told us. And if there actually is a 10 to 30% chance that humanity is going to have a serious problem very soon, then whether or not it's a company like ours or another company or hopefully thousands of other companies, if we all do our piece to eliminate just a tiny percentage of that so that we can start bringing that number down, all of that matters.
I agree. And I think what you guys are doing is great to see it's out there. It just, the folks with the numbers next to their names that exceed, the GDPs of 60% of individuals with their own net worth exceeding GDPs of 60% of countries or whatever in the world. Those guys have I guess what I'm saying is they have an outsized influence on something that is going to potentially have existential impact on humanity.
It will if we let them. But the thing about what we're trying to do and what we're talking about right now, this has to be a movement. There's no one company that could ever be big enough to solve this problem. There's no one person rich enough to ever stop it, as long as we all get together and go, this is really what has to happen, just because we have to make sure that we use this newfound intelligence responsibly. And if we do, and if we just get more people to go, okay, let's start investing in money into making sure that the governance and validation is going to work. And again, that's the type of company we are. We are an artificial intelligence governance and validation public benefit company. So we're not here to make sure that, that I have multi-million-dollar salaries. We're here to make sure that what we work on is going to be good for humanity down the road.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate your joining us.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you guys invited me. And Elena, I'm sorry it took me so long to accept your offer, but I'm glad I did.
Thank you, Tim. Pleasure to have you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.